On behalf of Manila House, this is Bambina Olivares, Director of Programming, welcoming members and non-members alike to today's virtual physio session, Ergonomically Speaking, Avoiding Work from Home Aches and Pains. When the world went on lockdown, work from home, or WFH, took off, revolutionizing the office by bringing it into the home. The appeal of work from home is obvious. No more long commutes and traffic, more time with kids and pets, and a more relaxed dress code. But as more companies expand and embrace remote working, a major downside has emerged: new or worsening back, neck, leg, and shoulder pain. As convenient as it has been, work from home can be a pain in the neck, literally. While we've all quickly adapted to the demands of work from home, our bodies may be bearing the brunt of our makeshift office. So here with us today is Francis Diano, a physical therapist, an orthopedic and sports specialist at PACE Prehab and Recovery in Uptown BGC, and he'll offer tips to make your work from home situation more ergonomic, providing movement fixes for common aches and pains that may plague us. Just by way of introduction, Francis leads the PACE team with a background of over 10 years in the sports medicine field. While based in New York City over 6 years, he worked with professional athletes that ran the gamut of sports, including players in the NBA, elite runners, as well as dancers from the New York City Ballet. He was also a clinical instructor to physical therapy students from different countries and hosts manual therapy, fitness, and running workshops. Inspired by Bill Bowerman's ethos of "if you have a body, you're an athlete," Francis sought to create a space to promote a lifestyle of being active and being able to stay active. Looking at each case through the lens of prehab, his objective is to guide clients towards a deeper understanding of their bodies, improving the weaknesses and accentuating the strengths, in order to prevent the physical and physiological trauma that an injury can bring. Francis also serves as a consultant for corporate wellness programs. The brainchild of years of advocating a preventive approach to physical care, PACE is the manifestation of Francis' vision of cultivating an active Philippine community that is both high-functioning and pain-free. Before we begin, just a few ground rules. This webinar is being recorded and based on your consent, because it's in meeting format, and you can all turn on your cameras if you'd like. So it's up to you whether you'd like this video up on YouTube or not. I'd be happy to get a consensus later on. So you might want to have your video on so Francis can check your movements during the session if you'd like to, take some of his tips and try them out at home. So without further ado, I turn you now over to Francis.
Hi, Bambina. Thank you for that. So I see there, we do have a few people online already. Now, a couple of things I like to do before we start is that in the chat box, if you guys have any questions, feel free to just go ahead and type it there. And then maybe Bambina can help me out in just taking taking note of the questions and then asking me them later on, or we can go back to them. The beauty of this being a smaller group is that we can make it more interactive. So if there's a little bit of confusion or there's a concern on one of the things that I'm doing and you just want to ask, then just shoot away and I'll try to get to that as soon as possible, okay? All right, so I will be sharing my screen. 1 second. Hope everyone's doing well. Okay. Okay, there you go. Just give it one moment while it loads.
The right things, or am I just marking on the things that I could mark off because it was easier to get done? Yeah, that right. Wasn't necessarily productive.
Sorry for that. Sorry, give me one moment. This thing is just taking a while to load.
Okay, while Francis is loading, just as a reminder to everyone that feel free to unmute yourselves later on anytime you have a question. And for those that just joined us now, if you'd like to turn on your cameras, your video at some point, while Francis is showing the exercises, you might want to do that so he
Hey,
can
Beans.
maybe correct you. Hi there. Okay, so I'm gonna mute myself now while Francis continues with his presentation.
Sorry guys, just having a little bit of, give me 1 minute. The internet is a little foggy. I think it's the weather messing with me. Hello.
Are you okay there?
Yeah, sorry, the internet is just messing with this. Sorry, guys. Just always happens when it's raining.
Oops.
Give me one.
Sorry, guys, just give us a second.
Okay, there you go. Sorry about that. Now I'm here. Okay, so just a quick brief through of what we're going to go over. This is pretty much the introduction of what we're going to talk about, just the outline. All right. So one of the things that the WHO has actually started to identify is that sitting is literally the new smoking. Dr. James Levine from the Mayo Clinic is starting to identify that the more that people are starting to sit in society, that we're starting to actually rival the medical issues that a lot of people are experiencing when they smoke. So oftentimes associated with smoking would be cardiovascular disease. You have issues with the respiratory system, issues with your circulation, which are also things that are actually starting to mimic that of sitting. So when we sit for extended periods, it reduces our ability for our lungs to actually function on a day-to-day basis. It limits how much oxygen we can allow in, which then limits the amount of oxygen that comes through our heart, through our brain, and then also limits our circulation. So we're starting to see things that are starting to mirror each other. So although yes, back then smoking was such a bad thing, now they're starting to say that, well, you know what? Sitting is actually almost as bad, just as bad. And if ever any of you guys are interested in the data behind this, I can send it to you also. Here's an interesting thing. And the reason why we're using Americans for this is because the Americans actually took the time to take this data. So on the average of a 24-hour day, or basically on a 24-hour day, the American will sleep for 8 hours. that's not actually always the case. Let's be honest. Most of us will probably sleep at about 6 to 7. We'll sit at work for about 7.5 hours, but realistically, in the Philippines, we probably spend at least 8 or 9 hours sitting. Then we'll watch TV for an hour and a half. We'll sit in front of the computer. And this is where it gets a little dodgy because it says it's an hour and a half. But truth be told, what's not included here is the amount of time we spend on our phones. And the amount of time we spend on our phones easily go up to at least 2-3 hours. And that's just us staring at our phone, looking at our iPad. You know, whether we're playing our video games or reading an ebook, it's a lot of digital time that we spend on. We sit to eat about 3 hours. That's pretty much an hour for each meal. So breakfast, lunch, dinner. So not too far off. And this is where it gets interesting. Sitting in the car pre-pandemic, an hour and a half in the Philippines, you're lucky if you only spent an hour and a half. Let's be honest, in the Philippines, you probably would spend an average of 2.5 hours sitting in traffic, even if you were just traveling between BGC and Makati. And that's the reality of it. Now, why is this such relevant data for us? Well, it's because when we add up all of the amount of inactivity, it exceeds about 22 hours, which means that we spend over 22 hours of just not moving. And when that happens, our body tends to rebel and start to have issues. So before I start on with our discussion, I like to show this slide to people. When you look at your work from home setup, we have our clean green screens behind us. We have our nice setup, but then that's what we call the meeting zone or the meeting view zone. But behind our screens is the non-meeting zone. So what happens is when you set up your laptop, what you don't show is what's behind it. And the reason why it's such an important thing to start with is because there is such a thing as visual fatigue or visual clutter. So if you have a busy environment behind your workstation, immediately your nervous system picks up on it. Your visual, like your eyes will start to get fixated on different objects. If you have, let's say, a very busy dining table, and that's your work area, chances are you're going to be fixated on different items on the floor, on different areas, just looking at it and just being like, oh, I want to move this, oh, I want to move this. And so your focus is limited. What you can't do now is you can't actually focus on the task at hand, which then adds up to the amount of visual stress your body is going through. So we'll start off with something simple. When you say organize your workstation, we actually really mean trying to just put things into perspective so that things are a little bit more simpler to look at, okay? When you organize your workstation, it doesn't mean that all of the items go into specific places, but it just means that you're placing and grouping things so that you're able to actually collect your thoughts as you're staring at objects. Okay, so for instance, if I have 20 pens spread out all over the desk table, I'll gather those 20 pens and maybe put them in a corner so I know that's where the pens go. If I have my laptop on one space, I will place my charger close to my laptop so that when I actually have to charge my laptop, I don't have to go ruffling for another 5 minutes looking for that laptop. If I need to find my mouse for my computer, I will actually keep that mouse close to my computer. So it's about being aware, being mindful about how you're starting to plan your workstation. And what I usually suggest for people is in your entire house, designate an area where you're going to work. And many of us have already started to do this. When the work from home issues started to come about, and when people had to start shifting their workstations at home, you'll notice that we've all started to find spaces within our house that will be areas that we work in. And I applaud people for doing that, but I highly discourage people to do more than one thing in an area. So for instance, if you're going to use your dining table as a workstation, then you want to find a section in your dining table where that is going to be your dedicated workstation so that you don't confuse your body or confuse yourself with, oh, this is where I eat and this is where I work. So you can actually draw a line and draw a barrier. And that's one of the things that we tend to lose with this work from home scenario, is that we lose the ability to draw lines and draw barriers from where our home starts and our work, from when our home, from where our work ends rather, and our home starts, and vice versa. And we're actually ending up with higher and more stressed out individuals because now all of a sudden your workspace and your home space are now one and the same. So creating that organization or creating that parameter early on prevents you from actually developing that. So this one here was the ideal setup when you were actually working at an office. All right. Most of us in the office would have the ability to have an office chair with armrests, a desktop. We'll have our shoes on and then a little bit of an area to incline these things, and which is fine. But when we started to work from home, we actually started to modify things. Not everyone has either the space for a desk, like such as this, or actually has a desktop at home. Chances are, if you're working at home, you probably have a laptop. And so what we're going to talk about today is how do we plan and how do we put those things together? One thing I will let everyone know is that corrections don't have to be extreme. So when I say they don't have to be extreme, take the top picture, for example. You have somebody who's on a laptop. He's typing away on the keyboard. He basically has two separate keyboards, if you notice. But look at his position. He is actually crunched over, staring down at his screen. Now, I'm going to take this away real quick, and I will pin myself. Okay, so I will mimic that guy here. I'm on my laptop. I'm in a perfectly, decent chair. But notice one of the first things that I will do to use this laptop is I will actually look down this way because the screen is down here. So anything I read will be in this area, forcing my head down. Typing away, that's pretty much where we are. Problem with this is that a laptop was specifically designed as a laptop because they're supposed to be on your lap and you're only supposed to use them for a short period. Granted that technology advanced and we can use our laptops for 9 hours or so without the battery dying, that's no longer applicable. So what do? Well, I like a simple way of improving our workstation by using books. So what I do is I actually take the laptop, place a stack of books underneath, and I raise it up higher so that now my monitor actually becomes eye level. So at this point, this is actually still fairly low. So I'll get another set of books, stack them underneath, and talk here. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually bringing the laptop screen eye level. And the reason why this is important is because it limits that forward neck posture this way. And this is the #1 culprit or killer for our neck. Later on in the slides, I'll show you guys why head position actually matters, okay? And anytime our head is out of a neutral position and we're leaning forward this way, we immediately switch on all of our stress muscles back through here. And when those muscles are switched on, immediately they contract to keep our head up tight or up here. But in order to do so, there's a lot of tension that comes. And that's why if you notice at the end of the day after using your computer for a while, or even just after a few hours, there's a lot of holding our neck here, holding it here, even just massaging or just moving our necks around because a lot of the tension will sit up here, okay? Okay, go back to this. Next is we show somebody with their cell phone. Well, the most common thing people do nowadays is they use their cell phone for everything. Whether we're talking about texting, calling, or anything like that. One of the things we tend to do is when we're on our cell phone, we actually tend to just stare down at it. And this is actually one of the reasons why when I have clients who come in and they complain of neck issues, one of the first things I always ask them is, well, how do you use your phone? And most people will be this way. I was like, okay. Or sometimes I actually just let my clients sit in the waiting room and I look at them from afar and they're on their phone this way. They're just texting or calling. And so that's how they are. But in order to do that, you're also doing this. which then adds that extra stress on your neck, extra stress on your upper body. So one of the first things I actually have people do to correct that is this. Your phone should be level with your heart. So that when you're using it, you're keeping it at least fairly eye level. I don't actually have people do this. Well, one of the reasons why it's actually a hazard, because then you don't get to see what's down in front of you. But I have it heart level so that there's minimal stress on my neck, minimal stress on my arms, and we're actually holding things in a very stable position. Easiest way is that you keep it level with the heart so that you're sending messages from the heart and it's sincere. If this is a live audience, maybe some people would be laughing. Next, here, I love this one because a lot of us try to work from home and work on a couch. But one of the things I try to tell people is that just because you're working on a couch, it doesn't necessarily mean you're always comfortable. Because when we work on a couch, oftentimes we have to put our laptop on a lower position to actually allow us to do our work, okay? This one here, well, I always tell people, clothing may be optional when you're working from home, but good posture is not. So remember that yes, you could work from home and be in your knickers, but it's not an option for you not to have good posture, because that's really what's going to make or break your body. Okay, this one, I always tell people having a work chair doesn't mean you actually just work on the chair. When I say that, a good example is this. I have a work chair right now, but just because I have a work chair, if I were to use it, that doesn't mean I lean back and I just type away this way, or I work on the chair. It's a simple chair. This chair is probably like 1,500 pesos. It's not like a crazy amount of money, but I know better than to actually work on this chair. But oftentimes, because we do have a work chair, we'll often find ourselves doing this, all right? Or if we're in a chair at home, we'll slouch and we'll do this. Same thing, head position, upper body position, down away at the computer, things that we want to avoid, okay? So your key takeaway here is always going to be the height of the monitor. All right, let's go back to this one here. So back to positioning our workstations. Well, how do we do it? Number one, eye level is always the most important thing. Second, screen brightness. Why screen brightness? Well, whenever we set our screen brightness to full, what happens is that the screen actually is blasting blue light straight into your eyes. And so in order to accommodate for that extra light that's coming through, the tendency is for our eyes to squint. And as our eyes squint, we actually create a lot of tension within the muscles here on the sides of our heads, or even around the eyes. And this can also result in straining your eyes, or basically creating fatigue through the eyes. So I oftentimes encourage people who have to work on their laptop for more than 4 to 6 hours to bring the screen brightness down to at least 50 to 60%. And for those of you who are Mac users, you can actually turn on what they call night shift, where it yellows the screen and switches off the blue light. Reducing the amount of blue light projected by the screen will greatly reduce the stress that your eyes are going through. Also, another thing you can do is they do have what they call blue light filter glasses, which is pretty popular with kids nowadays. I know a few schools are actually requiring their kids to wear them. And what it does is it reduces the amount of blue light that comes through this lens. So then that actually reduces eye fatigue for a lot of people. One of the things you can invest in early on is a lap stand, or again, just a set of books. So you'll see in both images here, you have a guy with a laptop stand, just brings up the screen so it's eye level, or a girl in the bottom right corner where she just stacked it on top of a set of books. Now we're going to go to this this issue here, okay? And this is what I was talking about earlier, right? Head position matters. At 0 degrees, or when your neck is neutral, your head naturally will weigh about 10 to 12 pounds. At a 15-degree deviation from the neutral position, so basically your head just tilting slightly forward, you immediately increase the amount of weight to 27%. 27 pounds rather. That's a slight increase to 30 degrees. That's 40 extra pounds on your neck. At 45 degrees, it's 49 pounds. And at 60 degrees, that's 60 pounds. And the reason why that's relevant is because what happens is that this muscle here that we're grabbing on our shoulder, what this little cartoon guy is grabbing, is the muscle that takes the brunt of the force. Because what this guy tries to do is it tries to save your neck and switch it on. And that's why there's a lot of shoulder grabbing afterwards. So we go down to this. Before I go deeper into how to position your laptop, I like to do this quick little break here. I want to teach you guys the value of breathing because the way we breathe actually affects the way we control our posture. Okay, so if we take a look at this video here, when we inhale and exhale, the main muscles that we use to breathe are actually located right here under our ribs. So this is called your diaphragm. So when we inhale and exhale, we actually allow oxygen to come in by allowing our lungs to expand this way. And one of the things that tends to happen when we're working at the desk is this. If I was here in front, let's say with my laptop, and I were to be breathing, and I'm already in a hunched position, I'm actually limiting how my diaphragm can expand. So if I were to take a deep breath, tendency is that I'll breathe using my shoulders. And if I'm breathing using my shoulders, that means I'm breathing using my neck. And that means that I'm taking all of the stress and using these muscles around my upper body and chest to breathe when I actually have a perfectly good muscle here that's designed for breathing. But if I were to adjust the screen and lift it higher, and I were to take a deep breath, notice my chest doesn't rise up as much because now I'm not in a flexed position. My diaphragm inflates and allows everything to come down and inflate. And then as I exhale, it comes back up. So it's not doing this, but it's doing this. Okay. So what I like to do with this breathing exercise is, and everyone, you can go ahead and try it. I'll walk you through it as we go through the movement. Put your left hand on your chest and your right hand on your stomach. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring attention to our right hand, just down here on our stomach. Okay. So as you inhale, allow your hand to rise up, your right hand to rise up. And as you exhale, allow your right hand to come down. And you know you're doing it right if your left hand isn't lifting up and lifting down. Okay. So we'll just try 3 rounds. So 6 seconds in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you exhale for another 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last one. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And last one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, one of the other more important reasons as to why breathing is so important is, well, think of it from a thought perspective or clarity of thought. In order for you to formulate good thought processes, you actually need to fuel your brain with oxygen. And if you're not breathing properly and you're depriving your brain of that oxygen and only allowing a limited amount into your head, then your thought processes will also be limited in that sense. So allowing good posture to happen and then allowing for the natural respiratory process to occur, that pretty much allows our body to create those thought processes through there. Okay. I like this question from John. I'll get to that one, John. Okay. Next, here. So we have these chairs, and honestly, chairs don't have to be complicated. And this will answer a part of your question as well. Chairs don't have to be complicated. Oftentimes, I always find it interesting because when I was living in the States, people were so bent on having Herman Miller chairs. And so they would say that, hey, can you write me a prescription for HR so that they would buy me a Herman Miller chair? And I was like, okay, but what's wrong with a regular chair? It's like, no, I want a Herman Miller chair because it has about a 30-point adjustment system. But I would tell them, like, 30-point adjustment system doesn't necessarily mean you're actually doing it correctly. It just means 30 more things that could possibly go wrong. So this is a simple way we can mobilize your position or your body in this position, okay? So you rotate on your chair, and it can be a simple chair like this. Again, it's a 1,500 peso chair. And you hold it for 15 seconds in each side, okay? So notice how he just rotates to one side and holds it. And that's it. All you're doing really is just creating that stretch. What you're doing here isn't necessarily a stretch to lengthen the muscle, but it's actually a motion to disrupt what your body is getting stuck in. Because we are so fixated in spacing forward that when we rotate and we disrupt that, it actually allows our muscles to breathe. It limits the formation of that shortening through the muscle. It allows things to get moving, okay? So before I move on to the next one, let's all try this together, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to rotate to the side, just like that, and just hold it for 15 seconds. That's it. And then you do the same thing with the other side. There's another variation to this here that I like, and I usually encourage people to do it. It's this: when you're seated, I'll raise this up just a little bit more. When you're seated, one of the things you can do is you grab the side of the chair, and what you're going to do is you're going to just lift your hand up over your head and go over to the side. And then you switch over to the other side through here, and it's the same thing. Okay, and that creates length in that muscle there. That creates the ability, again, you're breaking the cycle. All right, we move on to this next one here. This is actually one of my favorite ones. So notice how this lady's bringing her hands up, and she's just making herself tall and just side bending. And what you're doing here is you're allowing that motion again to happen within the spine. You're allowing the muscles to move, okay? And I always leave clients with these two simple things. Your muscles like to be stretched and your nerves like to be moved, but your body hates to be immobile. So remember that when your body is not moving, more things can go wrong. If we look at this guy, this gentleman here, we call this the world's greatest stretch. For those of you who go to the gym, you might have seen this before. This is probably one of the single most popular stretches that one can do. Okay, and froze. Sorry about that. Okay. Hang on, as I load that thing again. All right, so real quick while this is loading, to answer John's question. So John was asking with regards to executive chairs being sold online and being passed off as ergonomically sound. Do I recommend them, or do they work? Or is there a specific recommended chair that we need to look out for? This is actually a very interesting question, because oftentimes executive chairs are being thrown out. Like, a lot of people will freely and loosely use the word ergonomic. And when people use the word ergonomic, 9 times out of 10, oftentimes the people who are saying they're ergonomic don't really fully understand what ergonomics means. And so when we say ergonomic, it just means that it's the position that is the least stressful on the body. Okay, so when I say least stressful on the body, this chair I'm sitting on can be an ergonomic chair. As so can this 1,500 peso chair can be a ergonomic chair, as can be a 50,000 peso chair. And what makes a difference is how your body is positioned in that chair to make it worth your while. So two things I recommend to most of my clients when choosing chairs. Number one, know what good positioning for yourself is so that you're not dependent on the feedback of a chair to give you that. Because the tendency is that we buy an ergonomic chair, and because it's labeled ergonomic, whatever position we can get into in the chair is immediately labeled as a safe ergonomic position. So if the chair is slightly leaning back and we do this, and it says it's an ergonomic chair, tendency is we'll buy that as ergonomic. But in the true sense of what ergonomics is it actually a good, healthy position? No, it's not. But if we know that sitting upright, being able to keep that upright position, keeping your eye level monitor or your monitor level with your eyes, keeping your chin up so that this is in neutral, so that when your arms are down by your side, you're not raising them up to your shoulders, and that you can actually breathe using your diaphragm. If you are aware of those things, regardless of whatever chair you're actually seated on, that's actually really going to make a big difference. So I'd rather promote postural awareness than an overpriced ergonomic chair. I like this next question. Does the back joy really help get proper sitting position? Not really. To be honest, I can do the exact same thing with a back joy that I would do with a towel. So to show you guys that, before I go on with the slides, I will take this towel, just like a bath towel. I'll fold it in half. I'll place it right underneath my buttocks, just like that. And I'll sit slightly forward. And so what this does here is that the towel actually forces my pelvis forward into a more open position. So rather than my hips being closed like this, being seated on the towel allows me to roll my hips forward. So there's less stress on the front of my hips and into my hip flexors. And it allows the natural curve onto my back to stay and rest. So while I'm in this position, this is actually already a neutral position. And the reason why I like this over the back joy is because the back joy is very specific to whoever's back or buttock that was molded after or shaped. But the towel, you can kind of shape it to whoever size you want. If I find this to be too high, I can just split it in half, move it down, and do there. If I found the one earlier too low, I can just roll it even further and make it even thicker and higher. I've had clients who've come to me and say that, oh, I have to go on a 3 or 4 hour road trip and I can't tolerate sitting in the car for that long. What can I do? And I'll give them this towel trick, and they get to their destination with a little bit of stiffness still, but it makes a world of a difference versus them actually not using that, or even just trying to use a back corrector, like a back supporter, like the back joy. So I hope that answers your question there. Okay, let's see. Let's go towards my slide. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go.
Are you able to share, Francis?
Yep, I am about to.
Okay.
The internet's funny these days. Like when it rains, it starts to complain. Okay, so here they call this the world's greatest stretch, and the reason why it's called the world's greatest stretch is because it's broken down into pretty much every movement that your body would need to move in different directions. And so, if you notice, as he approaches the opening segment through here, reaching up for the ceiling opens up the chest. It stretches the leg that's behind, so opens up that hip flexor. It stretches the groin muscle. It stretches the mid back, the lower back, and even the neck. And so just getting into this position and just even holding it for a few seconds, what you're doing is you're actually allowing a full body motion to occur. And you're allowing for somebody to pretty much adapt and generate that length, or just even, again, break the static habit of posture. Okay. So one of the things I always encourage people is when you're sitting for too long, do something to raise your heart rate. And the reason why I encourage that is because even something as simple as this, where you're doing air squats, raising your heart rate allows more blood to circulate, but also allows more oxygen to go around your body. And that brief instance that you're raising your heart rate actually allows your muscles to continue to fire, and it allows your posture to reset. So the first one is air squats. This one here is just step ups doing knee to chest. The next one here is going to be a side to side lunge. And it doesn't have to be complicated. These are just simple motions. But again, breaking the cycle of not doing anything and being immobile allows ourselves to actually keep our body healthy. Now think about it this way. When we used to go to the office we pretty much would have to walk from our cars through the lobby, through the elevator, through the office lobby again, and then into our chairs. And to get out, we would have to do the same thing all over again. And there would be a few steps involved. For those of you who wear fitness trackers, you may notice that, you easily hit about 6,000, 7,000 steps, just without even exercising yet. But nowadays, with everyone working from home, chances are you roll out of bed, you walk to your desk, which is probably about, let's say, less than 30 seconds away. You sit down, you get up to go to the kitchen or to the dining table, which is another 30 steps away. And by the end of the day, you would have gone through all those cycles, and you might have averaged easy 2,500, 3,000 steps. And that's even on a good day. So you could see the difference of how even just when you would go to work, it would actually be good for your body because you're actually moving more versus when you're not at home because you're kind of more constrained and confined. I like this activity here. So there are 6 different motions I like, and you guys can take note of this. It allows you to center your body. Oops, sorry, not that one. And we start with this. It's very basic. So you just bring your arms up, bring your hands to your chest. And that's it. It's a breathing exercise. And then as we enter in this forward fold here, you actually create that length through the hamstrings, through the back, counteracting all of the extra sitting that we did. The bending forward now in this position allows us to mobilize the spine, allows us to kind of stretch out those hips. The plank position creates that nice load through the upper chest. And this is my favorite part. When we do this upward facing dog here, this extension is actually really healthy for the back. If you don't have any contraindication, oops, I keep getting kicked out of this thing. If we don't have any contraindications, that extension there is actually a really healthy way to reset your back and allow things to settle in. Okay, so I'll play that one again. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions so far? None at the moment? Okay. I will play this one again. Okay, so we'll start with this. Good, so there's that forward fold. So as we're going into that motion, again, opens up those posterior chain muscles or all the muscles through the back, opens up those hips. She's gonna proceed down into towards that plank position. Okay, so I think the internet really doesn't want me to share this one. Anyway, so question here, the movements are mostly gym or yoga based. Would Tai Chi be suitable also? Yes, absolutely. I love this question here because one of the things that what Tai Chi really does is it integrates movement and breathing all together. I love that practice of seeing people just breathing and moving, just integrating with every breath and every motion, just allowing the body to move and allowing the body to bring in that oxygen. That's definitely a big plus for me. Now, I get often asked, why is it that most of the motions that I tend to show people seem to be yoga based or gymnastics based? And one of the reasons why yoga is a big part of how I teach people is because I try to emphasize that yoga's been around for over a millennium, basically. And that's one thing that a lot of people have been doing for so long. It's a form of motion that is fairly safe. The only reason why yoga has been unsafe to many people is because people tend to not listen to the actual the actual issues that their body have, and they try to mimic what the yoga teacher is doing. Now, when I tell people that yoga is actually a good alternative, one of the things I encourage them to do is I encourage them to communicate with their teacher and tell them that I can't do this, rather than you're trying to mimic every single motion and every single thing that they're doing. Okay, so actually that was the last one here. I'll send the last video to Bambina so that you guys can actually have a copy of that. And I'm sorry that it didn't do so well with the internet. So I have another question here. What tips can I offer so that sciatica does not aggravate, considering prolonged sitting is required by a work from home scenario? Okay, this is one of my favorite ones, okay? And it's a fairly simple fix. I will stop sharing this. I will show myself. Okay. This stretch is my go-to stretch for most back issues. So many of us will actually sit here without realizing that this is actually a stretch that we can utilize. So when we sit in this position, we actually create that length through here in that stretch. One of the things you can do is you take your hand, place it on your knee, opposite hand goes on the ankle, and then we just lean forward. And then we drop our head forward just like this. And as we do so, we just exhale and breathe. And we can hold this for about 15 to 30 seconds. But for those of you who want to try it, go ahead. You'll notice that you'll feel a stretch through here, and then you even feel a stretch through your lower back. So when people say sciatica, it's actually a compression of your sciatic nerve here. So when you're creating that stretch, you're opening up this area. By opening up that area, you limit that compression on the nerve, which then limits that discomfort in your toes, okay? Another thing, for those of you who are already experiencing that numbness and tingling in the toes, one thing you can try to do is this. While you're seated in the chair, you point your toes up to the ceiling, just like that. And what you do is you hold the chair, slowly bend your body forward, and you'll even feel that length and that stretch through here. And as you do so, slowly tuck your chin in. And then you'll even feel the buzzing along your back. And the reason why that's such a relevant thing for me is because it just highlights how much tension is being stored within the nerves themselves. So just gently moving your head down to your knees and then looking up to the ceiling, even 10 times, will make a huge difference in terms of how your nerves are getting compressed and how your nerves are getting moved. Okay. All right. Do I have any more questions from here? I know, real quick. So for those of you who have neck issues and your neck's already bothering you, I know one of the hardest things these days is that we can't really get a massage anymore, or we don't get to get a massage as frequently as we want because it's such a hard thing to do. So you guys take a simple towel, just like this, and you fold it so that it comes into a nice roll. You place it around your neck, right through here. And what you're going to do is you're actually going to just grab the towel and pull it down. as you're pulling it down and forward, you tuck your arms or elbows in to your sides. And I want you to take a deep breath. And as you exhale, slowly lift your head up while you pull the towel down. And then as you look straight forward, slowly release. And then you repeat. Now, what's the relevance of that? As you pull the towel down and you look up, you're actually stimulating the curve of your neck. So if your neck was originally in this position, by pulling down and lifting your head up, you're allowing your neck to slowly restore that curve through here. And for those of you who have had like chiropractic care before or postural issues, you might have heard from your chiropractor or your therapist that, oh, you know, you have a straightening of your neck or your spine. And oftentimes when you have muscle spasms around your neck or your back, the first thing that reacts when you do your image is that your spine looks flatter. Okay, so that's one exercise there. Oftentimes it also comes with people having limitations with turning their head side to side. So let's say you feel very stiff, like you got that stiff neck from working too much into one position. Having a towel like this, one hand down, one hand up. And what you're going to do is you're going to pull down with the towel in front and slowly look towards the towel right here on the side and slowly pull the opposite direction and allow your head to come back to the center. You'll notice that the towel feels like it's pulling your neck in this direction and twisting it. What you're actually doing is that you're twisting and moving the muscle tissue within that portion of your spine, but you're also allowing the spine itself to move. Okay? And you can do the same thing with the other side. Pull down. And then pull the opposite direction. Okay? All right. So that's pretty much the last of my demos there. If anybody has any questions, you know, feel free to shoot me a question.
Francis, I wanted to ask, thanks for that. Those are all really useful exercises. I just hope we all remember to do them. So while we're at home. So maybe that video, yeah, the video will be really useful. I wanted to ask, is there any difference? You know, we tend to cross our legs as well when we're sitting down, right? Is that good or bad?
Well, it's not so bad, actually. You know, oftentimes people like back doctors or people in general will demonize the idea of doing that. For example, like this, they say, oh, that's bad for you because it basically creates a shift in your hips or your pelvis and whatnot. It's not bad. What's important is that when we do this position, just make sure you do it, you switch or you get out of it. Any position we do for our body rather, as long as we just get out of it and do something else, then we're perfectly fine. The one thing I do encourage though, and this happens a lot to guys, but since we don't go to our office anymore, we probably don't do it, is that for guys who tend to have their phones or their wallets in their back pocket and sit on it, that's the one thing I just encourage people to take out of. But the leg crossing itself, there's nothing wrong with that.
But what about the yoga style, you know, when you cross both legs? Like,
oh,
you lift your legs. Yeah.
Yeah, like you sit like that. Actually, honestly, I like it. I'm a fan of it. I personally work with it. The hardest part sometimes is when people do this and they work on their laptop. It's just that forward positioning of their head. So if you do this and let's say you want to work on your computer like this here, you can. That's going to be okay with you. This has no negative impact on your hips per se. But what you can do to also make it more comfortable is this. I will use either a towel or like this is just like a simple meditation buckwheat pillow. Sit on it here. Cross my legs. That's it. And by doing that, that actually allows my hips to tilt forward. Very similar to like the question that somebody had earlier about the whole back joint scenario. So that kind of just allows your spine to sit in a neutral position. Do you like to sit like this, Bambina?
Yeah, I do. I tend to actually.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
you've
it's
been to
very
my office,
Filipino
so
also. Yeah.
you know how a lot of my staff, like you've seen my staff sit, and everyone will find a comfortable position. At the end of the day, that's what people have to remember. Ergonomics isn't a 90-90 scenario where your head has to be at a straight
Mhm.
position, your arms have to be at 90, your hips are at 90. No, ergonomics is what's comfortable for your body, what's neutral for your body, and it's unique person to person.
Just wondering, are there any, wait, I have a question coming in. I was just wondering, anything also for the fingers and wrists?
Mm, okay. Common question people get oftentimes is a carpal tunnel, right? I think I have carpal tunnel, or this is actually really funny. Back when Blackberries were a thing, there was actually an official diagnosis for what they call Blackberry thumb because people were constantly typing away, just like type, 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 and the feedback that they would get from their keyboards was actually causing them to develop like a trigger on their thumb, and so this became very sensitive and sore. Now, fast forward to the evolution of things with a touchscreen. There is such a thing as Tinder, right? For those of you who may have experience with Tinder, I used to get people with Tinder thumb because they're all constantly swiping. And it was the funniest thing. I had this one guy who was just newly divorced and comes in 3 days later after his divorce was finalized and says that, hey man, my thumb is killing me. I was like, well, what happened? Well, I found this new app called Tinder and I was on it for like 2 days straight. And I was just like swiping. And the way he was swiping was this. I was like, wait, were you saying yes to everyone or like swiping right to everyone or something? Like, yeah, it increases my chances. But the point of it is that because there was a new thing that came about, then all of a sudden that was hurting him. Then there's this game called Fruit Ninja. I used to get this with a lot of older people who enjoyed it. They were playing Fruit Ninja where you slice the fruits on their phone or iPad, and they would get pain in their index finger in here. And a lot of it just came from doing this. And I was like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I play this game called Fruit Ninja. And so the point being that a lot of these injuries that we experience with our hands are always repetitive stress injuries. So the most important thing to do is remember, you need to break the cycle of repeated stress. So for instance, if we're typing for so long and just doing this, a simple thing to do is just to bring our hands together and just stretch it in that position. And that opens it up because our fingers go from this to all of a sudden creating length and doing this. Okay. Or if, for instance, we're constantly just typing with our wrists in this position, like let's say because our keyboards are up here, then stretching our fingers in this position and then slowly just rotating our hands side to side will actually help. Okay. Same thing. You're there.
Is there a specific number of reps to do for it to be effective?
Okay. That's a good question. So anything I usually give to people will have numbers between 6 and 10. So meaning if you're going to do this here, repeat it 6 to 10 times. If I ask you to do a stretch, then you hold it for 15 to 30 seconds. So to be clear, if we are going to do this, let's hold it for 15 seconds or 15 to 30. And then you can do it 6 times. Okay, and then repeat. And the same thing here. You hold it for 15 to 30 seconds. And then just move it around 6 times. And then hold it for another 15 to 30. And then you repeat. Okay.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? I had a question here that was specifically to sports, but maybe we can do that another time, no? We can work on a sports workshop in the future.
Is it like a fitness sports thing?
I'm just wondering what would the balance be then? The balance of movement and sitting around while you're,
Okay.
in a day.
So for instance, let's say you follow an 8-hour workday of just sitting in one position. I usually tell people set an alarm every hour so that for 5 minutes you get up and do something different. whether that's going to the kitchen, getting a glass of water, using the toilet, or just walking around outside in the garden, or even just like, taking a quick trip downstairs to the lobby and coming back up. Breaking the habit of sitting every hour is one of the most important things you can give yourself when you're working from home, because that's the one thing we tend not to do when we are actually at the office, right? Or when we're at home, because when we're at home, we have all the conveniences. Our helper is there. So if we want water, we just ask for water. Or we want food, we ask them for food. And everything is brought to us. But when we're in our office, we still actually have to get up to do things, right? We have to get up to go to the car to go home. We have to get up to go to lunch, So taking note that when we are at home, every hour for 5 minutes, you are going at the top of every hour for 5 minutes, you're just going to stand up and do something different. And if you decide to do any of the stretches I gave you, then for 5 minutes, you can do that.
Well, there's one more question here. Something about aches and pains due to more activity than rest. So not more than 3 to 4 times a week for a late 40 something.
Mm-hmm.
So
more aches and pain. Well, so that's actually a very interesting question, because sometimes it comes down to the intensity of the activity also, right? How hard are we going at the activity and how long are we going at it for? So for instance, we may only work out 3 to 4 times a week, but then if we're doing if this is the one with a HIIT workout also, if I'm not mistaken, so if you're doing a HIIT workout, which is a high intensity interval workout, that means that for the brief period of you working out, that's a lot of explosive damage your body is going through. And if you're doing it 3 times a week, oftentimes that's a lot of abuse that your body's actually taking. So sometimes I'm not a big fan of HIIT workouts for somebody who is sitting for extended periods and all of a sudden going to a high intensity explosive workout, because imagine you are going from a very sedentary activity to all of a sudden something that's making you go full on and all out. And you're basically redlining your body fairly quickly. And if we were to liken it to a car, it's like you just came from the parking lot and the first thing you did was floor it until you maxed out the red line of your car at full speed. And then all of a sudden, when you got to where you needed to go, you put it in park and just go to sleep. And then you do it all over again, like 3 times a week. Eventually, you're going to put so much stress on the car and the engine that it's just going to crack. So having that kind of exercise where there's a moderation, where things slowly build up, and then you can do a high intensity one, and then another exercise that slowly builds up again, really prolongs the longevity of your body. And that's the reason why endurance athletes tend to last longer physically than athletes that just do short, high intensity workouts.
Okay, I have a question. Now we're talking about prehab, right? How do you define prehab? That's what you do, right? So how different is it from rehab?
So that's a good question. So when I started my practice in the States, I focused primarily on injury. And one of the things that was always frustrating for my clients was that, so does that mean I have to go back to zero because I'm hurt? Classic example was I tore a muscle. And now that I tore a muscle and I have to heal it, does that mean when I start lifting again, I have to start from scratch? And oftentimes the answer is yes. And the reason why rehab tends to come into play is because there's too much stress that occurs in the body, and the body just gives up. The concept of prehab is very different, because what we tend to try to do is identify the stressors that your body will undergo, and we prepare you for those stressors. And what we do is, by identifying the stressors, we also slowly try to take them away and minimize them. So for instance, if we know that you are going to be running an extreme amount of mileage that week, let's say you're running an easy 50 kilometers a week, then we're going to prepare your body for that 15 kilometers a week that you will be running. Versus that if you built and ran that 50 kilometers, then I would basically just say that, you come to me after you're hurt. And then we have to rebuild that whole thing again to get you to run 50 kilometers. So what we try to do is prehab is proactive management of your health. We create that level of awareness and response and accountability within yourself so that we can allow your body to function at its best at every given point versus rehab where we wait for something to break and then we have to fix it. And so we go back to the analogy of a car. We know for a fact that we have to maintain our car every 5 or 10,000 kilometers. Otherwise, it increases the chance of breaking. And when it does break, it's a more expensive fix. And that's prehab. Rehab would be like, let's just drive it until it breaks and then we'll just replace what's broken. And oftentimes that costs us more money.
Okay, that's great. That was a good analogy. Here's one more before I think we'll have to close now. But here's one last question for you. It's more of a sports question. But what is the amount of time you would generally allocate to stretching in a typical 1 to 1.5 hour workout? And does this ratio change with age?
That's actually no, it doesn't. That's the good thing about that. And often, and remember this with any, and this applies to across the board. When we're stretching, any pose that we hold or call a stretch should be held for more than 30 seconds. Okay? And if we hold the stretch for more than 30 seconds, then that means that we are actually stretching through there. So does it change with age? No, it doesn't. Although the elasticity of the tissue may change, the response that the body has to a stretch does not.
And stretch before and after, do you recommend?
Well, I usually encourage people when we talk about stretching, I encourage people to do that after the fact. One of the reasons why I don't tell people to stretch before an activity is because the tendency is that when the tissue is still cold and you pull at it, it's like when you pull at plastic and then you stretch it and it just gets stretched and then it doesn't actually bounce back. But when you stretch your body at the end of a workout session, it's like a rubber band. When you pull it, it'll bounce back. So we kind of want that. We want that nice elasticity through the body. So stretching at the end is definitely helpful.
Okay. Are there any more questions? I think that's it. That was the last question we had. On behalf of Manila House, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today, and thank Francis especially for that really informative session. And Francis is at PACE Rehab and Recovery. It's in Uptown BGC. And Francis, you have an Instagram page or Facebook page where people can find you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Get in touch with us as well, and we can connect you to Francis. Either way.
Yeah. So
otherwise, we look for you on Facebook.
My Instagram's really easy. It's just FS Diano. So it's Frank Sam Diano. So you guys can shoot me a message there. Or if you guys are interested in just like looking at different movements and exercises, we actually have our Instagram page for PACE Prehab and Recovery. So it's at PACE Prehab and Recovery when you search it on Instagram, and you'll see we actually have weekly stretches and motions there that you guys can integrate. Even the ones that I showed you today will be there. So definitely something you guys can take advantage of.
Okay, great. And for those of you who want to see Francis, just contact him through his Instagram page. And he has a really nice studio. What would you call a studio, right? A recovery center. Yeah. And very all the protocols. It's very safe and secure, and lots of space as well. Very nice area. Lots of light, lots of windows. Yeah.
We run a fully vaccinated staff here.
Yes.
So
yeah, that's very important. Yeah. Okay, so thank you again for joining us. This video will be up as well in our YouTube channel in a day or so. Any other questions, just get in touch with me, get in touch with Francis, and we're happy to help.
All right.
Thanks so much for joining us, and see you next time.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye for now. Bye.